as you wish. So they're live as you go in. The microphones are on the table, so if you speak up from around the perimeter, you're gonna have to ask you to speak up loudly.
Thank you. All right. He's gonna go check it. I'm gonna start assuming that we're okay. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This is the October 1st, 2015 Academic Standards Meeting. We have several things on the agenda, though I suspect that most of you are here for one particular piece. As Jerry mentioned, the meeting is being recorded. The video portion of the recording is only what we see on the screen, but the audio is being picked up, so we're going to ask that everybody please keep to a single conversation because the mic will seriously pick up everything that is said. For the benefit of those that may be listening at home, the room is now filled with, 20 or so members of the public, some administrators and board members. I'm Denise Brooks. I'm a board member and chair of academic standards. For the benefit of the people in the room who may not be familiar with everyone, I'm just going to ask my board colleagues to introduce themselves.
I'm Jerry Grubb, board director.
I'm Bill Foster from New Tech School Board.
Okay, and there are several board members that are running late and will join us later. So we're going to start. We have a few things coming. I know the majority of you are here to talk about the German language program. We're going to save that to the end to allow the most time for the conversation. So we have a few bits of business to get through before we get there. So we're going to start with Health and PE.
So Liz Potash is our district curriculum coordinator for health and physical education, and she is requesting some title changes and some alterations in how we offer a particular physical education program. So Liz will explain the request.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone.
All right, I'll kind of just take you through some of the things that we're looking at. We're looking to make a change to two of our elective courses that we currently offer at the high school. I actually introduced you guys to this, I think, last year when I was here for the PLC work, but just to kind of catch you up to speed, we really adopted these new national standards for K-12 phys ed, and with us doing that, it's really just kind of opened our eyes up to re-examine and look over our programs further, and these standards really just kind of lend themselves better to what our programs are because it's a more comprehensive program than just simply talking about kind of skills and strategies. So just a little bit of a refresh there because I'm going to kind of highlight two of these and how they really fit in well to the courses that we'd like to see added to our programs. So what we're actually proposing at this point is we currently run a class, Accelerated Exercise Physiology and Sports Science. It's an alternate day class that runs year-round. Informally, some of the students refer to it as Super Gym, XPhys. It's a bit of a more accelerated phys ed class. What we'd like to do with it is we'd actually like to split that class into two classes. What we found over the years is that we actually have guidance counselors coming to us saying for those kids that want to be active, we really only offer one movement type class. So this gives us an opportunity to now offer a second movement class, not really looking for like a prerequisite type move, but just two different types. So what we're proposing is that we'd like to see our current Accelerated XPhys class broken up into two classes, an accelerated PE class with a focus on team games and sports, and an accelerated phys ed class that focuses on individual activities. Within the team games and sports class, and I'll talk about those a little bit more in detail, it'll offer students an opportunity to participate in just a higher level phys ed class that's really going to focus just on team games and sports, specifically on evasion, fielding, and striking games. And some of those terms are kind of new to those new national standards, which is kind of why we're trying to bring them up for you. Particularly, it really lends itself well to the one standard, which here states the physically literate individual exhibits responsible personal and social behavior that respects self and others. And when you really start looking at the grade level outcomes within the standards, it really comes down to the high school level. It really focuses on accepting others' ideas and differences, examining moral and ethical conduct, and in competitive situations and taking on the leadership role. So within that idea of a team game and sport class, we can do more than just teach how to be active. We can have them taking on leadership roles, which we're currently starting to do within our phys ed setting. The other half of, the second part of that class then would be, not the second class, a summer course would be the accelerated PE in individual activities. And this has become a huge focus for our department what we find is, what research really says is that most people choose to be active through lifetime activities, not so much through team games and sports past the age of 25. So we've really tried to broaden our phys ed curriculum across the board and try to offer more of these individual and lifetime activities. So this course would give students an opportunity to do that. It would focus solely on these lifetime fitness activities. It really lends itself really well to our the standard 3. The physically literate individual demonstrates the knowledge and skills to achieve and maintain a healthy and enhance level of physical activity and fitness. And again, at the high school level, the grade level outcome really focuses specifically on physical activity and fitness knowledge, the ability to develop a fitness plan, and make connections between physical activity, proper nutrition, stress management. So we feel like these 2 courses could really hit the standards really well and offer kids, a much better opportunity. Just a really quick overview into what it could look like for the accelerated PD for team games and sports. Just trying to break it down by marking period, and I did meet with the current ex-phys teachers, so we kind of all came up with this together and planned on it. In the first marking period, the first 3 marking periods, we focus on invasion games. Invasion games meaning a team game where you're taking some type of implement to another opponent's area and trying to score. Looking at some of like the fall-based games in the first marking period. Assessment-wise, we talked about scenario-based assessment specifically related to sportsmanship, as that ties right into the standards. Second marking period, looking into 4 invasion games, basketball, handball, and some variations. Currently, an assessment that they already do in ex-phys is a coaching philosophy reflection, so we're carrying that over again into the leadership piece. Third marking period, moving into some floor hockey variation games. Now our assessment is looking more like a skill and strategy assessment. 4 out of 3 marking periods for all the invasion games, and then finally finishing up the 4th marking period with fielding and striking games, some baseball and softball variations. And with that assessment, something that one of our colleagues currently does over at North would be to create / teach a game type project. So just looking at how we can connect the movement with the assessments for that particular course. And then the second one, the individual activities, really breaking it down, it will be pretty different by marking period, but looking at the first marking period, thinking about some of the different net and wall games. And again, these are just some suggestions. There can be variations within that. Skill and strategy assessment, with badminton, tennis, pickleball, table tennis. Fitness activities in the second marking period. This is a really good opportunity where we can really work on that piece of the standard for incorporating how to plan a fitness and nutrition plan. The third marking period, looking into what they refer to as individual performance activities. We have all of the facilities and equipment to already house all of this stuff. And from there, we really look at scenario-based assessments on cooperative games and activities. And then finally finishing up in 4th marking period with what we refer to as target games and all of these different variations. And the assessment there looking at the purpose and value of lifetime activities, which again, we're really starting to focus a lot on in our phys ed classes anyway. Now it just kind of give us more of a deeper appreciation for that.
So on that.
I was going to say before I move on, because that's kind of that first piece. Is there any questions about that?
So I think you'll find a lot of support for encouraging lifetime activities.
Mhm.
And so I don't even know what pickleball is. And so some of these things, is there a way to look into the future and say what's most likely to succeed or take for the long haul? And then you'd think about focusing on those, because people will jog,
Right.
stuff that.
Yeah, and so all of those is kind of what goes into that whole idea of these individual activities. And what we found in really, trying to not make this connection too much here, but for doing our PLC last year, we really learned a lot of this information in terms of what the standards are really emphasizing. And we did find that there's a huge emphasis on more of these activities, but it's only because, like I said, they say about 5% of people over the age of 26 will continue playing team games. And while we recognize that, our current population isn't 26 yet, and we have plenty of students that want to be involved in team games and sports. So to just take that out completely, we didn't think that was valuable either. But yeah, the focus is really on these now. And in terms of the lifetime movements and how to keep people active, these are the things that people are mostly doing. And I mean, I've started teaching a lot of them in my own phys ed classes, and we talk about that all the time, these are the ways to be active. But it also comes down to the idea behind, are we trying to encourage movement, or are we trying to encourage physical activity, right? Because the team games and sports, we're gonna get the increased heart rate. Here, we might not necessarily, but we're gonna get the movement. So it really is a separate focus between the 2 classes. But I mean, I do agree, these are the ones that they're gonna carry out for a lifetime, for the majority of
Just
people.
within those set, would you over time change the mix of them as you begin to think that there may be others that are more likely to need to like them activity?
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
Some things we don't really have the infrastructure for to push as well as we might want to, like swimming. We don't have as big or as many swimming pools. But if we did, do you think that would be a great?
Absolutely, and actually on my first write-up, I actually wrote like within a couple of these, at North only, we could certainly incorporate the pool. But yeah, I mean, and like I said, we put these on as like a starting point because when you look at our standards, they're kind of directly linked to what these different categories are. But we've done a lot of polling within our teachers and then also of our students in terms of like what activities do you guys want to see in class. Those are the ways we started coming up with some more of the activities. So yeah.
And is there a summer school component at all? Like so for instance, where I grew up far away and long ago, we would have summer swimming. And that was a way to get.
I mean, we have our community swimming programs that run indoors, but nothing formal through the school.
There's no like physical education credit you can get in summer.
Non-council, but not council.
Not for council.
Okay, thanks.
What, how does this figure into weighting, not weight training, but the weights for academic weighting of the points?
Accelerated. It's currently an accelerated course, so we would keep it an accelerated course by tying in the assessments. We would keep it at the accelerated level.
Are there any costs related to changing this?
No, because there are already programs that we currently run. It's just really a matter of taking our current class, splitting it to give more opportunities.
So in my experience, a lot of the students that were choosing the original course were primarily choosing it like in 10th grade when they were taking health because they couldn't take gym and they missed that. Do you, I'm just curious, is that still the case or is it across the board?
Not so much because we do offer 10th grade phys ed as an elective for students who are in 10th grade health. It's kind of across the board. Actually, one of the things we originally looked into was maybe splitting it into like a 9-10 class and an 11-12 class. That was conversations that Barry and I had with schedulers as well. But we're seeing now that the numbers are kind of all over the place. One of the reasons that actually caught it to us as well is we have students, 9th graders, who come in, want to take X-Phys, and then they're done with the movement class for the rest of their high school career. So now we can actually offer them another one. It's kind of across the board in terms of who's taking it.
Right, but at least the question is sort of like, so now you're doubling the offerings, and this is probably hard to answer, it's easier with some other classes that, like new courses that we bring, but by adding the second class, what do you think students are not going to be taking? Like, do we know like where, you know what I mean, like when we added like AP environmental science, we knew that might pull from certain, but this is really random, you just don't even know what you're going to get, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you the majority of kids that take our X-Phys classes now are students, I mean, it is across the board. We do have a lot of students that are typically, trying to think of phrases, not always our most academic kids, so they are looking for more movement classes, so I don't know what they take.
And we also think that it's possible that the students will only take one of these. So where they now take the current accelerated phys, now they'll just bring, there's enough students that you can offer multiple
And
sections.
how many students enroll in the original class now?
I think we are currently running 3 sections at South and probably 3 at North. So, and actually what we're hoping to by separating it into activities is, I mean, obviously in our idea, we're hoping to draw more kids, especially into this course, because this is a little bit unique.
I think it's great.
In terms of the activity wise. Yeah.
I have a couple questions and comment. First of all, if somebody signs up for this accelerated PE in 9th, 11th, and 12th grade, are they also the same year taking regular gym?
Yes, yeah, it would be in addition. So it's an elective within the health and phys ed curriculum.
Okay. And just one thing I wanted to suggest to Dr. Foster was that team sports, they say are really good for learning how to work in corporate environments with the management team in group projects, etc. And it was one of the big movements early on for women who didn't have a chance to play team sports to learn how to work in a corporate environment. And one other thing, have you thought about putting yoga in the individual activities?
Yes, certainly. We've been doing a lot of it. Over at South, we've been teaching a lot of it recently. It's going to be part of our in-service in November. But yes, it will all be a part, probably more in this area, but yes, certainly room for more activities to be added.
And one last question, this goes to Denise's point. if I wanted to take this instead of regular gym 1 year, because I wanted to take another elective, would that be possible?
No, because phys ed is a requirement in 9th, 11th, and 12th grade.
This isn't just an elective.
Just
This is within our elective program.
But now, that's what you say, but why is it just in the elective program? Help me to understand that. If someone chose to take it instead of the regular phys ed.
Well, phys ed is a requirement in 9th, 11th, and 12th, and then we offer a couple elective courses. This would be one of the additional courses that you would select in addition to the required course.
We're talking a circle here, which is, what does this not offer that is required in a physical education course to be approved as a physical education course in the state of Pennsylvania?
In other words, I think, if I can interpret or try to interpret, I think what he's saying is if I have to take 11th grade PE, 11th grade required PE course, could I instead take one of these programs and substitute if I have 11th grade general phys ed?
Right, and that's not the way that's not the way our program is set up. No, I wouldn't think so. What we're trying to offer is at a higher level and a more advanced level than what you would get in your, core class of phys ed. I don't know if that answers the question.
I think it's worthy of a conversation.
What it does is the answer is based entirely on a supposition that may or may not be valid. That is really arbitrary, which is our choice to have a phys ed class and this as an elective and only as elective is arbitrary. If this meets the state requirements for physical education or meets our own district requirements for physical education, then we could take it out of the realm of.
Well, I think you could answer that. I know we have to keep moving, but I think you could answer that with any content area. So you have a required English class and then you have elective English courses within that. It's the same thing. We have a required phys ed class and then we have electives within. I don't know, unless I'm just not
We have
understanding.
required, let's go the other route, which is we have required courses
Mhm.
and we have accelerated honors courses in those required courses.
Right.
That's the same notion. So if you take English, or you take an honors English, or you take French, or you take accelerated French, or whatever you want to do, we offer it that way, and that counts towards your requirement. So that's all the question was could you not choose this instead? Take it instead of PE.
So I guess what I would say, I think it's worth exploring. I would want to make sure that these courses, and they're not fully developed pending, a nod from the board, but I want to make sure that these courses fit all of the health and PE standards that
That's
we
the question.
meet. Right, and if they do, then we can have that conversation about whether there should be an alternative that could replace rather than just supplement.
That's the nature of the
Yes.
question, because what happens is, in our district, and it's important to know in all of our academic areas, we offer so many gradations that we wind up offering gradations where the population is not fully staffed, it's not fully populating the course, but we have to offer it. And so that could be what this becomes if it's an elective. If it becomes an alternative pathway, then we don't run into that problem because,
Yep, actually, and we're very tight on time, and I know this is unusual for people who attend academic standards meetings frequently, but if you don't mind, we want to try and move forward with this with a little bit of speed, and we're going to ask that public comment wait till the end so that the board has time for their comments first. Sorry. Moving on.
All right, I'll just kind of hit on our last one. This is purely a name change. So our current course is our Accelerated Studies in Sexuality course, which is a 12th grade only, again, elective. It's more along the health lines because it's in the classroom. What we're proposing to change the name of the course to is Accelerated Senior Seminar Life 101. A couple reasons that we've been looking at this, and this has been something that's been coming over the last couple years. The course has really evolved over time, but unfortunately the title has stayed the same. So what we're finding is there is definitely a focus on human sexuality within the course, but really the majority of the course is, it's a pretty broad spectrum now. It's a perspective on healthy decision making in the future. The current class focuses on contemporary issues that face students in the world of health as they advance beyond high school. And really where we came up with this name, this probably took, probably taken about a year and a half to come up with this. But this has evolved from a lot of different places. Discussions with the current studies in sexuality teachers, students who are in studies in sexuality, talking about, if you could name this course, what would you name it type thing, and then administrators as well. So really all we're looking for is just a course type change. Nothing much to the frameworks or anything like that. And again, it's just the course really has evolved and kind of stepped away from just that human sexuality piece that I think it originally was.
Great. Thank you so much.
Why did it take a year and a half? What was the
To
nature of
get the
this?
name,
Yeah.
we went, there were so many that got to that point, but.
There's so many good options.
Yeah,
Sort of like.
And I like that senior seminar thing. I think that's,
Yes, that was the selling point.
I really like
Where we
that.
find
Like
out.
one-on-one sounded a little hokey to me, but if they like it, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thanks, Liz. This is new in terms of conversation because we've not spoken about NCAA here in academic standards or in general with the community, but it's probably a good idea to alert people to this, most especially because we find ourselves in a little bit of a predicament. So the NCAA course does a review of every high school in the country, and they give a nod to whether or not those courses will count towards core course requirements that students who want to participate in an NCAA Division I or Division II program. So I just put this up here just to give you a sense of what those requirements are. They are actually making the requirements a little bit more stringent moving forward for the 2016-17 college school year. Part of that is they're weighting and calculating GPA on these 16 core courses. They're looking at a minimum 2.3 using those best courses because some kids could have more than the 2 years of the natural physical science, so they'll take the best. And then they're using a sliding scale with that GPA and the ACT or SAT scores to determine the eligibility level of students planning on participating in the Division I or Division II athletic program.
That GPA is calculated unweighted?
Unweighted, yeah, they do their own calculation. The courses are just submitted and the grade, they take it from there. The NCAA takes it from there in terms of that calculation. So RC8 is a code that is attached to certain courses. We were notified very late in the school year, probably in May of last year, that a number of our courses were flagged as RC8. And when that happens, high schools must upload the required documents that you see here. And really, part of what we were informed of by the NCAA was that our titles in and of themselves were the first flag that drew their attention. And because of their, I guess, view of courses throughout the country, what they're really looking at is anything that they believe is not on an academic level that is intended to prepare kids for college. So when they hear words like foundations or remedial, that immediately is a flag, regardless of the course description and the units. So even though we didn't have to change the titles, we were advised that if we did this and did not change the titles, it quite likely would come back flagged again. So the process, unfortunately, is we submit this. We have to submit it in November. Once submitted, we are then on a wait list until we hear from the NCAA. Even with our changes, it's possible the NCAA would not approve some of our courses. We're hopeful that's not the case. And if that were the case, then we would have to advise students that if they were taking one of those courses, they need to be aware that that would not count for NCAA eligibility, okay? So these are the current titles. It only happened in social studies and English. So, certain courses that we thought could also, be flagged by the NCAA were not, based on some of those titles that we think would conjure up a more remedial level course. So the 3 foundations courses because of the term foundations. So we're looking to change those titles to literacy studies in each of those 3 grades, 9, 10, and 11. We're also doing a slight revision of the course description. Now, I'll be honest with you, we really wanted to do a much broader look at this. We said, since we have to review it, maybe we should look in long term, both as the course itself as well as the sequence of the courses. We just don't have time to do that. It requires a much more in-depth conversation. So I only say that because, in this case, Dean Hentz, the social studies curriculum coordinator, would like to do a more thorough review of this, and we may come back to you again in the future with some other changes. But we're looking short term because we have until November right now to do that. So these were the recommended title changes that we'll be making in social studies. And then there were a number of English courses. And again, very interesting. The critical viewing course, students and the teachers will tell you it's a very difficult course. But because of that title in and of itself, it was flagged. So the courses to the right are the new titles that we're recommending. Again, can't guarantee you that they will receive approval, but we, talked to other school districts, tried to fill out the NCAA a little bit. We know some of these titles have been approved in other districts. Now, again, we don't know that they'll be approved again or they just slip by in the NCAA review of that particular district. But these are the courses that course titles that we're going to go with.
So, Barry, this is a silly question, but it's serious in nature. Are we worried that some of the title changes might scare kids away?
Well, I don't think so.
I like critical film analysis and critical viewing, and I'm not sure if I get to the next line.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting you change it. I'm just,
Yeah, I think what happens in most cases is students have an opportunity to talk with teachers as course recommendations are being made.
Okay.
So they're informed and, we'll get a sense of what the course is. And I'm sure they're going to tell them, listen, it's critical viewing. We had to change the title, but we have to change it in our program planning book and move forward. So again, you're right. It could have some impact on some students who aren't quite clear that was the previous course. But I believe our counselors and our teachers will make that clear to all those folks.
How do the student athletes learn about all these nuances? I mean, is this something that coaches are informing them? My kids were never, how much count athletes, but then how do they, is this just common knowledge that it's part of the culture of high school athletics?
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, you know that if you anticipate a child participating in an NCAA 1 or Division II program, that you have to register on the NCAA clearinghouse site. And it's that family's responsibility to have their transcripts sent, to claim their amateur status, and to go through all these steps. And then you get preliminary approval, and then once your senior transcript is sent, then they get final approval. And then the colleges go into that and have access once you provide them your NCAA number, and they can check if they're recruiting you or thinking about having you come out for one of their programs. They have all that information on you through that NCAA clearinghouse.
do our counselors have that expertise? I mean, I'm going through that now with my son at 12 and 13 and looking at the profiles that these athletes are establishing for themselves in terms of uploading videos of games and that type of thing. So the clubs outside of school are very focused in on that, but are our counselors to the same degree?
Our counselors are familiar with the clearinghouse piece of it. The coaches are more familiar in helping the student athletes to take on that other piece of it.
I can't believe how big and complex it is.
It is big. It's very big. And there are a number of third-party vendors who will help you to work through that process too.
So is this something the board needs to approve, or is this just going to?
They're just title changes. They're no really different than the studies of sexuality change. They're really not major changes in content or course frameworks.
Right, but the new courses would have to be approved?
The new courses we would bring before the board, the accelerated PE courses we would bring in the next board meeting, yes. I just asked further than not. Okay. Okay, secondary grading. If anybody was here last fall, we had a conversation that was a presentation about what happens. And I'm calling it secondary grading, even though this was a high school presentation, but we follow the same grading practices in both. So I want to give you a short history of it and then talk to you about some changes that are forthcoming. So in Council Rock, historically, our grades have been A through F, the traditional grading system, but we had a nuance that allowed for pluses and minuses that were completely subjective and up to a teacher's discretion. So a student in one class could get all 100s throughout the year, end up with an A grade, another student with those same grades with another teacher, that teacher may have opted to put a plus to the grade. And when we shifted to eSchool Plus, we sat down with a committee of teachers and administrators, and we thought that it would be a pretty good idea to try and take away some of the arbitrary nature of that grading from teacher to teacher and assign a default grade, and most especially for the pluses and minuses. So what you see on the left-hand side are the percentages that translate to the letter grades that students get in grades 7 to 12 in each of their 4 marking periods. So a student that gets a 99, regardless of the teacher, regardless of the school, ends up with an A+. Okay, before, that could have been an A or it could have been an A+. So that change was made when we transitioned to eSchool Plus 5 or 6 years ago.
Are those averages rounded?
Well,
They're rounding involved? Great.
no, they're not. So that's why we went with the 97.5 and we rounded up from that point on. So 97 point
So a 97.49 would
would
round
be
to a 90.
an A, right? That's correct. And there's got to be a
Okay, I'm just
threshold
asking the
break.
question.
Yes, no, that's
Because that was always a big thing. Some teachers round, some don't
Correct.
round.
correct. So what you see is what the default grade is. So if that student ended with a 97.5, automatically would be uploaded an A+. If the student ended with a 97.49, the default grade coming out of eSchool Plus would be a B+. Now teachers, or an A, I'm
Right.
sorry, teachers always have a little discretion in that conversation, and you'll hear a little bit about that when we move forward. So really what happened is we made that change at the marking period level, but we didn't carry it out to a final grade. So up through last year, what occurred was that teachers had to manually do a calculation. So an A grade was worth 4 points, whether it was an A+, an A, or an A-, it was worth 4 points. Well, if you had 4 points in all 4 marking periods, you had 16 points, you looked at a chart and it became an A. The plus and minus, again, optional by teacher. What you also had was that if you had 2 A's and 2 B's, then you landed in the middle and it fully fell into teacher discretion. So it could have gone to an A-, could have gone to an A, could have gone to a B+, or could have gone to a B. There was that span of grades. Now, the landing point was really an A- or B+, but there was that discretion again because the A's, the pluses and the minuses were very optional in terms of the final grade. So when we met in the fall, we talked about that, and there was a belief that we should probably look to see if we could take some of that away and make the final grades, again, a better picture and more consistent across schools, teachers, subject areas, etc. So to do that, we had to come up with a calculation. So it wasn't as easy as just saying we wanted to do it, but if we wanted to happen automatically, we had to build a calculation. So what we did was we came up with changing the quality points for each of the grades and separating a plus from a minus, as you see up here. So those quality points ranging from 0 to 12. So now, again, automatically, if a student were to have 4 A+, they would have 48 points. The default grade would be an A+. If they were to have 2 A+ and 2 A's, they would fall into, what is that, 46. And again, we rounded up. You had to pick one way or another to go, and this generated a lot of conversation because the conversation was we already gave students the advantage of kind of bumping them up at 97.5. Now we're going to bump them up again. Where are we starting to, not provide an accurate picture of a student's performance? But again, over time, we felt that the right way to move was to bump the grade up and make that default. So what you see will be the new default grading system moving forward. The one I draw attention to is when a student is scoring very low. So in other words, if you look down the bottom, the D minuses and the F. So if a student were to have 2 D minuses and 2 Fs, we're allowing teacher discretion with that. And the reason for that, there we go. And the reason for that is 2 D minuses and 2 Fs, there really needs to be some teacher input as to whether or not that student mastered enough content to pass the course. But that's where most of the discretion lies with teachers and determining a final grade. This is just another picture when it's a semester level course. So only because you are taking half of everything. So that there's really no difference in what the default is, except you have half the quality points that would move you forward. The last piece I want to share with you is that there are some exceptions, and we don't take them lightly, but there are times in which a teacher believes that a grade needs to be adjusted up or adjusted down based on their experience with the student, what they've learned about the student's progress, etc. And these things are in place. That doesn't happen independently. That happens when a teacher believes that there is reason and justification for it, and then makes that recommendation to the principal and receives the principal's okay or not to make that grade adjustment. The family, the student, and the parent are notified of that, and that grade change is made. So that just kind of gives you a sense of it. So we really were able to work with both the teachers and the administrators and put into place what we think is going to be a fairer and more consistent final grade for all of our students.
So in the on the transcripts in the calculation of GPA, all these plus and minuses count. And this is being implemented this school year?
This is being implemented this school year, right?
And so this breakdown of how the quality points work and all that, is that in the high school agenda books? Like, how, I just want to know how this was communicated.
Yeah, these charts you'll find in the student handbook.
Okay.
Yes. So they
And
know.
I guess teachers would share that too.
Yes.
I'm really happy. I think this is definitely something that how long have we been talking about this? Like forever. But what I'm most particularly happy about is to see that consistency across the schools, because there was so much that was arbitrary along the way. So I think this is great. I'm happy to see this.
Yeah, I give our folks a lot of credit because they spent a lot of time really thinking of the nuances and making sure. I mean, the easy thing to do is to always make the grading easier or raise the grades higher, and that's not how they attack this issue. They really wanted to make sure it was a fair representation of what a student's performance was.
Right, just to be clear, so the system is now going to automate this and enter the final grades, but at the end of the day, the teacher has the discretion to move that within a marking period or within the final.
Correct. Okay. Okay, so the majority of this evening was really intended to spend some time on a discussion about German in Council Rock. Just a brief background, the conversation about German in Council Rock began back in the spring. A couple of things happened initially, and I should say it really began several years ago when our curriculum coordinators, the current and previous curriculum coordinators, shared with German teachers in Council Rock that we were concerned about the decline in enrollments in that language, and that we would be monitoring it, and if we weren't able to see that it was a viable program, that we would at some point in time in the near future look to make a recommendation to stop running the program in the middle schools and the high schools. In May of last year, I sat down with the teachers of German. We had a pretty lengthy conversation, explained to them the thinking, the rationale behind this recommendation. They fairly had an opportunity to share some of their thoughts, some of their concerns. At that time, they had asked if since we were going to be going through a change in superintendents, if they would have the opportunity to also meet with Dr. Frazier. I told them I can't guarantee that, but I would certainly respect their wishes to relay that information. When Dr. Frazier came on board, explained to him where we were, the process that had taken us to the point that we were at that time. Dr. Frazier scheduled a summer meeting with myself and the teachers of German. Again, we had some great dialogue, an opportunity to share both sides of the thinking of eliminating the program or keeping it, and the pros and cons of both of those. They were then advised to put into writing some of their thoughts that would support the continuation of German in Council Rock. Dr. Frazier and I met with the group again later, about a month later, and went over that documentation, kind of had an opportunity for them to supplement what they put into writing with their thoughts, and that brought us to where we are now in terms of this recommendation to discontinue German in Council Rock. So a couple of things about this. this was one of the more difficult recommendations to make because, I'm sorry, Andy?
I just wanted to make a quick comment here because I understand it's about German. Everybody's here to talk about German. Not to steal a little bit out of this time here, I think.
Go right ahead.
For me,
Still
and Ali had said this to me before I articulated it, but for me, this is about languages in general and how we improve the readiness of our kids coming out of high school for the world or for secondary education with languages. So I'm hopeful that as we, work through this German piece, and is it the right thing for kids, and if it is, how do we, make it viable or consider what viable means? And it shouldn't just be German, in a vacuum. It should be other languages if there are other languages out there that can be proven as valuable in more of the global economy.
And we have had that conversation about, do we look to supplement what we currently do? If we do, how do we do that? Is the traditional approach still the right way to go? So that's the next step in the conversation if this moves forward.
Great.
So again, what made this very difficult was, the German program itself has a wonderful reputation. Our teachers of German have a wonderful reputation. Students who are in the program speak very highly of that program and their experiences. So this is what made it more difficult to move forward. And I just highlighted a couple of the things here that really probably don't do it, full justice in terms of the big picture of German. But it's a well-recognized program. Teachers that have very great reputations within the community and within the language department and with the students that they have. So it had nothing to do with the program or the students or the teachers, but what it did have a lot to do with is that we continue to run into some, what we believe are some pretty significant conflicts in how to continue with the program. And you'll see in a little bit, I'll try and, bring some clarity to some of these things. But as you can imagine with any progressive course, you see a decline in the number of students that continue with it over the course of a second or a third, and certainly a fourth year. So when your numbers are already declining, and then you see that the attrition rate helps to remove more of those students as they progress through the levels, that some of those courses are going to be difficult to run. Not difficult to run, they're very easy to run, they're just not very efficient to run when you have 4, 5, 6, 8 students who are selecting a particular level of the course. The inconsistency at the middle schools, a few years back, you folks may remember, we were unable to run German for 2, maybe 3 years at Richboro Middle School, tried to bus some of the students as a first period offering so that they would at least have that opportunity. Most middle school students and parents aren't excited about starting the day an hour earlier, especially since they don't end any earlier. So there wasn't a great number of students that elected that option. Most of those chose another course, but it also created an issue with students and parents who said, why don't our students have that same opportunity that the other schools had, the other 2 middle schools? We're having that now at Holland Middle School. So this year we're unable to run German 1 at Holland Middle School because I think it was 5 or 6 students signed up initially, too small to run that program, so the students had to select another language. Staffing implications that are affecting us, so that kind of has a couple of different pieces to it. So I'll use an example of a small section of German. We'll pick a middle school. So let's just say Richboro Middle School has 18 students taking German. Well, that's okay in terms of the number, but what it also does when most of the other languages run between 25 and 30 is if those 18 students were in that other language, we could add another section of that language and reduce those overall numbers. So it's very difficult we're running some Spanish sections in the 30s, and you're running a German section at 18, where if you had that additional 0.2 teacher, you would spread those numbers into the 27, 28 range. In addition, when we are not running sections to fill the teachers of German schedule, their full-time schedule, then they are because of other certifications that they hold, are now displacing teachers typically in social studies, but they also have some English certifications and maybe some others. So whenever a 0.2 or 0.4 German class is removed from the schedule because it's not running, then we are moving that person because of seniority into another area of certification, and now other teachers are being bumped out of their teaching periods based on, again, seniority alone. Efficiencies kind of fit into that whole conversation. You know, you're running smaller courses, you're not running as many sections, so it becomes a more costly program to offer. And then lastly, it's starting to conflict with other programs that we run that we typically don't offer when we don't have enough students to fill the section and run them in the 15, 18 or higher. So a few years ago, we would use 15 as our starting point if we didn't have 15 students in any course. At a high school, it came under review. A couple of years back, the board asked us to consider, as we hit some budgetary implications, to look at raising that number. So now we look at 18 as kind of that break point. There's some variations on both ends that include special education, but electives and other programs that include foundations level courses, but other courses that weren't running at that 18 came under review, and then we made a decision. What we found with a program like German that is sequential in nature is that it was going to be very difficult to not run a German 4 class of 8 students, because what do you do with that student who's now 3 years into the program? And it would be very unfair to pull the rug out from under them at that time. So we've always run those courses. So what I'd like to do is give you a 4-year look at the numbers, just to give you a sense of it, and then I'll kind of give you a sense of some of the other languages that we run and what those enrollments look like, and then we can have a conversation. So in 12-13, you can see that at North we didn't even run a German 1 program. This was the first year, I believe, that Richborough was able to bring German back. So you get a sense of the total numbers there. I think there's some math on each of those that I can speak to. So there were 290 students in the 12-13 program across all German sections. So when you went to 13-14, what I started to do over the course of this 4-year look was not only show you how many students were enrolled, but then to look at the retention rate, because I think those two things play hand in hand. So you can see the number of students. So if you look back from the 12-13 to the 13-14 school year, from German 1 to German 2, and that would be all levels. You had 83 students in German 1, that declined to 68. So two things were kind of happening at this point in time. We started to see a slight decline in the overall enrollment at our high schools as our numbers began to drop. And then, in addition to that, we were seeing a decline in the number of students who were electing German. So that combination started to hit. So you'll see that we went from 290 in 12-13 to 268 in the 13-14 school year. So again, that's not a huge decline, except that the overall numbers are not large. So that small change in overall enrollment, and then you add the retention rate, and you're seeing that we're seeing some lower numbers, especially as we get into the German 3 and German 4. Again, I won't be overly repetitive because all this is really a look at the numbers. The overall German that following year dropped to 248, so we went from 290 to 268 down to 248. The retention rates are not consistent. They're kind of up and down. I don't know that we know why that happens. It just is happening.
Barry, you don't know if this students transferring out of Council Rock.
We would not know, right?
Retention rates.
Right, but we don't have a huge number of students, because we do have students who transfer in too. So I wouldn't know what the breakdown is, that's correct. And then when we move to the 15-16 school year, the current school year, we're down to 233 students in German across. Now again, one of the alarming pieces to this is really that you're not offering German 1 at North or South. There were not enough students even to run a shuttle course, and we're not offering German at Holland Middle School. So we have 70 students that are in the pipeline to move forward into German 2 in future years, and if you look at the retention rate, you can begin to see that those numbers as we get to the 3rd and 4th year in AP studies are going to be concerning. And again, this is really an efficiency conversation. This is not a knock on the language, it's not a knock on the teachers. Our students have just selected different languages than German. German remains strong. When this conversation began, I'll tell you that we were looking at French and German together. And for whatever reason, French stabilized. Those numbers remain the same. I'll give you a sense of that just so you have that comparison. In French, over that same 4-year period, it was 495 students to 478, 479, 458. So those 4 years, you can see not a huge difference in overall numbers. Their retention rates are probably similar, so I'm not even suggesting that once students go into German that they stay there any more or less than they do in French or other languages. I didn't even continue with Spanish, and I'll tell you why. Spanish in this year, we have 2,130 students taking Spanish across the middle schools and the high schools. In middle schools alone, there's 461 students. So I didn't even understand what that would help us to know other than that's where our students are going. We know that that's where they are choosing to go in general. So my belief is that most of the students who have left German have gone to Spanish, and most of the students who wanted to stay in French indeed did stay in French. And we've asked questions as to why. You hear a lot of different answers. You hear it because of the change in the culture and the language within the United States. You hear conversations about what's easier or what's harder. For every student you talk to, you get a slightly different story. But we do know that most students believe that Spanish is the language that would better serve them moving forward. Accurate or not, I can't tell you. I can just tell you that that's what they've stated. And then the last thing I did a quick look at was Latin. And Latin, again, is a difficult course to make comparisons with because we do not offer Latin at the middle school. So the first level language opportunity is at the high school. So this year in Latin, we have 185 students, and that grew from 14-15, which was 166 students. So when you look at just in the high schools alone, not counting the middle school opportunities, there's 163 students in German in both high schools this year. There's 185 students in Latin. They didn't even have them. So those students switched a language or took their first level language in 9th grade. More took Latin than we have in the German program. So this just gives you a picture as to some of the concerns that we share about scheduling, and I just highlighted in red those that we felt were extremely low. So 2 things are happening here. One is that you see that in a general sense, the German sections are small overall. The largest class we offer is 25, and you see that in a couple of different areas. To make the courses viable, and I give this as a credit to our teachers of German, they've agreed to, because they feel so strongly about the program, that they would combine courses. So you can see German 3 and Honors German 3. Neither of those would run at 8 and 7 unless we chose to run it because it was sequential and didn't want to stop that language study for a student. But they agreed to run them together, but still combined. You have 15 students in that course at North. German 4, you have 13 students combined, only 1 taking the regular German 4 and 12 taking the honors. Again, we didn't have to combine at South, but you see some low numbers there. The AP course is a shuttle course. I think most of the students are South. I think there's 2 maybe that are more students heading over. But again, that gives you a sense of how those sections are running, the numbers of students in them, where we have to combine. In addition to that, that doesn't include some of the teaching schedule that had to be reassigned. So in other words, we had to have our middle school German teacher bumped in to pick up the remaining part of her schedule at Council Rock South. That bumped another German teacher section out of Council Rock South into social studies, and you have that ripple effect. And that was that scheduling piece that I shared with you. We also have, although it's not specific just to German, we do it periodically, but in German, since we're talking about that, that requires also at least 1 travel period, if not more, depending on how these courses will run in the future. And that's an individual period that a teacher gets assigned to travel from building to building that's not in front of students. So that kind of gives you a sense of it. I just wanted to give you a picture of it. Again, I don't know what this tells us other than I thought it may be of interest to see what other districts are doing. So these are the other school districts that offer language within Bucks County only. I know recently Central Bucks had a German program. I think it was 2 years ago that they stopped their program. Kind of no rhyme or reason. When they're not offering German, I just thought I'd ask them what they did offer and get a sense of what their other languages are. I mean, I was really surprised to see as much, a couple of Italian offerings up there. Again, maybe cultural to that community, I don't know. But this is what you can see in your other districts. Those that have yes to German obviously offer some other programs. Everybody has Spanish. Some may have French, but again, I don't know if that mattered in terms of this conversation. I just wanted to give you that picture. So for those reasons, we suggested that the German program not be stopped immediately, but that we would gradually phase it out over the course of years so that all of our students in German 1 could continue through the language. As you see with those numbers, it would mean that we would be making a commitment to the German 4 and or AP level German classes running relatively small, because you're starting with 70, and with the retention rate being what it is, you're going to have some fairly small classes 4 years from now, but that we wouldn't offer German 1 next year, German 2 the following year, et cetera, and track that through. So.
I know there's a lot of public comment. I just want to let the board have a chance first. And so I'm just going to start. So I'm intrigued. The first thing that you said was that the conversation began in the spring. So I just want to make it clear. I've been on the board for 2 years. For 2 years, I've been the chair of academic standards. I have been part of no conversation, none. The first time I learned about any of this was in an email, so I would not call that a conversation.
No, I'm sorry, I meant with the teachers.
Okay, and to that point, not only has the board not had a conversation, it is clear that no students, no parents, no community members have been part of the conversation either. So that is troubling. And I'm going to express my bias because it feeds into what Andy had said before, because I deeply believe in the benefits of language. If I had my way and money wasn't an issue, we would institute world language in first grade. Anecdotally, another piece that concerns me is that through the course of some conversations, that parents or students were sort of counseled away from taking German during their course selection time, because this ultimate future may have, they're trying to predict the future. And so I'm not even convinced that the enrollment that we've got this year is true. There might have been a much greater interest in German, and then fear of the discontinuation of the program scares certain people away. Having attended academic standards meetings for 15 years, I recall numerous conversations when we talk about taking a course out of the program planning book. We let that course run for 3 years before it's actually removed. So if it doesn't run in a single year, the following year that course still exists in the book, and it isn't until a 3-year period that we remove it. So I'm very much opposed to not offering German 1 next year. The interesting thing is, we're on the verge of something that's going to pose an interesting situation in that 2 or 3 years from now, we're going to close Richboro Middle School, and in the combination in creating a larger Holland Middle School, that might very well change the entire dynamic of how courses are offered and students who might choose them. And so I certainly would rather not see, my preference would be, if we're going to make some significant curriculum change to the languages, I'd rather wait until we get into that arena. But it is not lost on me that the efficiencies and the numbers matter, and it would be completely hypocritical of me to say, I want efficiency in this area, but I don't want it in something else. If the students don't choose it, if the numbers don't work, if the class minimums are not met, I don't want a rule applied to German that wouldn't be applied to any other course. But then again, I don't want to use the logic and say, well, if these 18 kids had only taken Spanish, we can reduce the class sizes in Spanish. We should not be playing one class against the other. We have rules. There are minimums, maximums, and how we set those sections should be consistent regardless. And I don't want to create this friction of let's help one program and then hurt another. So for me, I very much would like to see German, no changes made whatsoever to the program for next year. I think that we need to do a better job of helping students and parents pick courses. We had received an email this week about the possibility of a language fair type thing, which I think is great if it could be organized. But I would like to see no change. For me personally, I would like to see no changes. See what happens if, now that this has generated more talk, now that students and parents can approach this perhaps with a little bit more information, what's going to happen next year? Let's give it a shot. Let's not, let's talk to our counselors and not predispose people or use what I think could be a little bit of a scare tactic to say that this isn't going to run, and let's get a fair assessment. At the end of the day, if students don't pick this course, no matter how much I want the program to continue, no matter how much I think that German is a valuable language, it's not something that I would support. I don't think that this has gotten a fair assessment, and certainly not enough conversation to rush into this and not put it in the program planning book that's going to be printed next month.
So just two comments, just for clarity. I don't know of any advice that was given to students to not take German. I know
And to be fair, what I've heard is, well, actually, I have heard from one parent directly.
Okay.
I have heard several things that have been anecdotal. So I don't know if it's true. A counselor might have felt she didn't say it, but if that was the perception of what it was and how the message was received, or maybe it's not true, I don't know, but that whole specter of possibility that it's true is very troubling to me.
Fair enough, agreed, although I did not hear that. So the other thing that I think is important to know is we have not applied the same standard to running courses with German and some other courses that we do for all courses. In other words, if you take a look at the sections, some of these, German 2 would not run at North. And German 3 would not run at South unless it was combined with Honors German 3. And AP German obviously wouldn't run. Now, when we got to some of the higher level courses, in an AP course in particular, we always have tried to run that in all curricular areas. But the dilemma with a language is that if you don't run the German 2 at North, you're building the fall of that program because you don't have any German 1 students coming out of Holland Middle School this year. You have no German 1 students coming out of either North or South, and you're going to take the German 2 students that are currently at North and the German 3 students in South and take them away. That will tell us that the following year, you're not running your Honors German 3s or your German 4s or your AP. So that's one of the reasons that we are making the recommendation to phase it out rather than to get to that point and say to students, you've taken 2 years of the study, sorry, you're going to have to change your language, which means they can never get to an Honors 4 or to an AP program. So that's the dilemma with this is if we run them according to that same standard, these courses would not run in the future.
I understand,
So-
but you yourself said that this conversation started a few years ago. And so there's this disconnect in terms of how this process has transpired. So I don't know what unintended things could have sabotaged certain things, or I don't know. But what I do know is that for me, I do not want to use what I believe was a bad process that, previous to this, to make a decision right now for next year.
Well, for me, it really comes down to, I'm not married to any one language. English, I depend on that. But I'm not married to any one language. So you look at it and I say, when I went to school, we had German, Spanish, French, Chinese. I think that was it. So I look at it and I wonder, I want to try and leave the cultural side out of it. It's like, well, the German culture is great. Well, if that were the case, then we should also do Italian, because Italian is great. Or we should do Hebrew or Arabic. So how do you decide which language to do? It's a marketing situation in that perspective. And so when I look at it this way, I said before when we spoke with phys ed, one of the aspects that I'm concerned about is we have many gradations. And because we have so many gradations, we don't have enough wellhead in any one to do it. And going forward, we're going to talk later in the other room. We're going to talk about the decrease in student population that's occurred. We're down at 1,400 students. So, you know, I'm eager to hear what the community says, but things I want to say is, one, I agree with grandfathering anybody who's in the process now. So anybody who's in the pipeline now, this is, where you say we don't do it, I call that grandfather. So we're gonna I agree with the concept that anybody who's in the process now is taking a language, regardless of what language we cut it, we'll continue with that language. I look at it and try and figure out Andy, to your point, my entire career has been in international business. And I've worked internationally. I've spent a lot of time, too much time in Belgium. We don't teach Flemish. So how do you pick which language? I understand the virtues of a polyglot, or even bilingual, but just polyglot, yes, but even bilingual. I'm glad to stay with languages. I just don't know how many we should do. That's my struggle. So I don't even know if French and Spanish, or Spanish seems to draw heavily. Is the world now turning to Japanese and Chinese? How do you decide? So I'm interested to hear what the community says, but for me, I'll readily say, grandfathering, absolutely. Nobody should be in this thing, get up to 2 or 3 and then not be able to finish the game. That's not fair. Beyond that, I'm eager to listen, but I have to look at it from the perspective of keeping the sections populated at an equitable level. And I want to validate the languages we have. Latin's great, but Andy, to your point, I don't know where it's spoken communally anyway. So I don't know what that does for making our students valuable in the international forum.
So I guess picking up on that, the piece for me here is, we always spend lots of time talking about operations and efficiencies. And if there's not a demand for something, then we can't do it. But I guess the question is, when you think about the things that are going to take us from a top 10% school district to a top 1 and achieve the goal of making our students best prepared, there's certain things we can do. Improving the way we use technology is probably one of those. Having a great language program is probably one of those things. So I think I agree with both what Denise and Jerry are saying in a different way. My appetite would be, because to your point, I don't know which one is best other than my own experience running around the world, which isn't great, but having a lot of folks come to me, is understanding what is driving the economy and what employers are looking for. I mean, you see folks from other nations speaking 3 or 4 different languages. I'm not the expert. I think we've got the experts or can find the experts. I'd like to really see how we can ramp up this program with the right offerings and make sure that we're advertising it. We're pushing kids to this thing. Like, we know the music, kids who are involved in music early tend to probably be better students. To me, language, I think, is going to make somebody a more well-rounded human being that's going to get more opportunities. So I've got a huge appetite around languages. To Jerry's point, not sure which they are. I would hate to see us stop doing something before we're not sure what we should be doing, if that makes sense.
For people's understanding, we did for 2 years try to run Chinese. So we partnered with Bucks County Community College. There were no Chinese certified teachers in PA when we started it, but there was a Chinese teacher that we partnered with out of Bucks County Community College. It was actually run at Council Rock North, so they were able to come to our school. And again, the first year, I guess probably because of the newness of it, we had a lot of kids express some interest. By the second year, it was relatively low and not enough to interest for us to continue with the third year. So so we did try moving that. We heard that was the way to go.
And let me counter remark. This isn't a shot at anything that's happened in the past, because just based on my limited experience here, relatively speaking, the last 3 years, I don't have the benefit of that. But when I take a look at things like technology and where we are and maybe where we'd like to be, maybe this board hasn't focused or voiced a desire to support really blowing up good things like this. And I'm not sure my peers feel that same way, but clearly there's an appetite for IT that there wasn't before, and technology. To me, language might be one of those other big things. And I'm looking for you guys to tell me that over time, because we can only do so much. But that's where I'm coming from.
I mean, I want to thank you, obviously, doing this kind of analysis and meeting the teachers and recommending this is, as you said, difficult. And I think your presentation is really helpful. And so you're clearly doing your job. And thanks. I share Mrs. Brooks' point of view in that I think the community and the board really wants to have a voice in pushing language forward into the future. And whether that's driving language down into lower grades or taking this opportunity to see if German can fly, give it a little bit more time. Because I think that people have come out and board members have expressed the desire that we do better in language. And this is an opportunity for German. And it may or may not make it, but it's worth having engaged the community to and heard their voice to give it a chance, in my opinion. Even though, and you've done a great job of expressing how it carries forward through time, and there's a pipeline, and that there's this long-term commitment that gets created by running an additional 1 or 2 years and having it be kind of iffy. And it's incredibly inefficient, I understand, but see, let's go for it. Let's see, let's see if it can do it. And let's think about languages. Can we do more? And are we willing to pay for it? So that's where I'm at. And again, I really thank you, because it's not easy to open this up, but it's important. So thanks.
I have an 8th grader at Newtown Middle School who's taking her first year of German. To Denise's point with regard to where we have come culturally, when she came home with her paperwork and said, I want to take German, I said, ooh, are you sure? That's risky. Classes don't always run. I don't know that I can see you through to the end of that. Be prepared, if you're going to make that decision, that you might have to make a switch. So I see it from both sides, but I was also the board member and the parent saying, not sure that's in your best interest. So if that's coming from me, because I have that knowledge or for whatever reason, that was me being a parent, it's gotta be coming from other parents as well. I admired her, she chose to stick it out. I had emailed Denise earlier this week, I think it was this week, and what I find is that, I'm here 7 years, other people are here a whole lot longer, and you come up with suggestions that have already been there and done that. But I don't know that we're doing the best job of exposing kids to what their choices are at the middle school level. So I had said, we have this reading class in middle school. There are children in those 7th grade reading classes that absolutely need to be there. And I understand that. But there are also kids who do not. And I thought I had a great idea of, hey, why don't we take that year and expose kids to all of the languages that we offer, so they have a framework and they make informed decisions, and they go home to their parents and they say, I've tried that, I hate that one, I like this. Denise basically said, yep, that's already been done.
Been there, done that.
So that's already been done, and maybe it didn't work for a reason, and I understand that, or maybe more kids needed reading, I don't know. Interestingly enough, the email that we received from the PTOs about how do we do a different, or I don't want to say better because I don't think we're failing. How do we enhance upon it at that middle school level, so we potentially, and then if we spend a year and we try to do that, or 2 years trying to do that, and it doesn't work, we're left with no options. We're left with making a hard, lousy decision. But I would like to invest in it somehow differently to see if there is some way we can save a program that it doesn't seem unsalvageable here.
I do want to say that that in and of itself has been one of our challenges, because we've had this conversation with the teachers of German about the opportunity to, I'll use the word recruit, more students into German. Well, we used to have that. And we put an end to it because it became a recruiting war, because those students are coming from somewhere. And what we ended up happening is you had all of your elective areas now battling and, telling different stories to students and putting students in the middle, where one teacher would say, you need to take this course because a college is going to look at it and it's going to serve you well to get in. Another one says, that's a lie, I called the college. And really it was because they were battling over, a finite number of students. So what we moved to was having the coordinator, then Young, going to each of the middle schools and presenting the 3 languages, trying to give a fair representation. And then if you want to speak to that, you certainly can. I don't want to put you on the spot. But she would go to each of the middle schools for the 8th grade course selection, explain the 3 languages, why they might want to consider one or the other, or the third, tell them that in the high school there was a Latin offering available, and have a fair, equitable representation of all 3 languages. So Lynn, you want to?
Yeah, every year I go to all 3 middle schools and take students from Council Rock South and Council Rock North and speak to the 7th graders who are choosing their 8th grade classes about all 4 languages offered in Council Rock. And also point out that they can't choose Latin until 9th grade. There's a slideshow presentation, we have videos, and the kids, really the best draw, or the best attractiveness of the program is the students speaking. And the German kids, a lot of times they'll come and they'll talk about the German exchange that we have, because it is the only exchange program we have within world language, and it's really, it really pulls a lot of attention. So that's what I get the opportunity to do. So that's the exposure that the kids get prior to selecting. They get to hear from students, they get to hear about why they take the language. I even found some videos of celebrities that speak the language that I didn't even know were available, so the kids like to hear that, and they can hear Leonardo DiCaprio speaking German and Sandra Bullock, who didn't know. And then what we offer, what a day in the classroom looks like. We have pictures from the trips that the students take, either in the summer, in Spanish and Latin and French, and then the German exchange. So they get, within an hour, they get a snapshot of what's offered.
And I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we're not doing exactly that kind of thing. But the kids are not invested. That is an hour out of some other classroom. I don't know how invested a group of 7th graders are in that type of conversation until they're forced to be invested in. You've got, 6 weeks of, same as they are with careers. You've got 6 weeks of Spanish, the most rudimentary Spanish, the most rudimentary German. And I don't know, I just feel there has to be something.
And I'm not suggesting that's enough. I'm with you.
Patty?
So for me, I didn't get to the beginning, I'm sorry that I was late. I had a lot of grandchildren today. They never went home, they just stayed, made dinner, stayed. For me, and I talked about this with Denise, hopefully we're gonna get some savings here over time, efficiencies maybe. For me, both of my children took language in Council Rock. One took Spanish and one took French. I had 4 years of Spanish. I do not speak a word. I never spoke a word. I never understood it. I had 4 years of Latin. I guess I can repeat part of, the aping and way for you. I don't know. I have to work on that timeline. But the best way to teach language is to teach it early. And so for me, in order to have a robust language program, it has to be started in elementary school. And if we would pick one language and teach it to every 1st grader, every 2nd grader, every 3rd grader, 1 period a week, every week, till 8th grade, we would make a community of bilingual people. And that community would be a community where those children could readily share language. And the reason our kids don't speak Spanish or speak French is they live in an English-speaking household with some Italian relatives thrown in. There's no consistency or cohesion in America learning languages. And so it's foolishness. I don't mean to say that I think everything you do is wonderful. But it amounts to nothing in the end for us. Nobody most, I would say 90% of the kids do not leave doing anything more than being able to read a manual. And you need to start earlier. We need to start earlier. If you really truly want to invest in foreign language, then start at first grade and take it all the way through. You know, for me, I buy Spanish teachers. If we can save in some other areas, or we can reorganize in ways that allow us to save something, to have something, that's where we ought to do it. And I think you really should be lobbying at the state level, lobbying there to get finances for foreign education, foreign language education. That's really where it begins. The support of the larger community for this particular subject area. So that's what I came here to say. Rick?
Just want to comment on two things that you said. You said that, if I heard correctly, in 2 or 3 years, we will be closing Richburg Middle. No decision has been made on that.
Okay.
The other thing is, I agree with you on Patty, that languages should start earlier. First grade or full-day kindergarten, since I thought full-day kindergarten. But when I spoke with you, Barry, a few days ago, your plan made sense. But now I'm thinking, maybe we're premature on this because we are going to decide whether the 6th grade is going to go up into the middle school or not. So the grade configurations may change. If we do start languages earlier, and the 6th grades are involved and they are in the middle school, maybe then you'll have more enrollment in the German course. So maybe it's premature to be looking at this at this point and wait until after we decide on the grade configuration. So but maybe you'll have a better feel on that. Will grade configuration make a difference in the enrollment in German? Is that a guessing game? I don't know. If it won't make a difference in the enrollment, then I guess do it if it can. If it may, and we can start languages earlier, then I would say delay it and wait until we decide on the grade configuration.
So, I mean, I would say the grade configuration won't make a difference, but the program change would make a difference. In other words, if you move 6th grade to middle schools and ran a 6th grade program like you currently do, and ran a 7th grade program like you currently do, obviously, so you not only have to make, I mean, really the grade configuration is less important than if we would make a programmatic change.
Right, that's what I meant.
Yes.
Putting the 6th graders up there, but also changing the program to make them really part of the middle school.
I have to say one thing, I heard so much about the aspect of it, it's just the fact that people chose a different language. Students chose another language, and marketing and all of that has come up repeatedly tonight. So I just crafted like a very simple marketing campaign that Council Rock could potentially entertain if you're gonna give it a go to see if something like this would generate more interest. And the idea is that the German language program is really synonymous with everything at Council Rock. So the tagline is Frequency Council Rock, and then you can tailor it to each school specifically. Frequency top notch because our German programs are award winning. Frequency STEM because we're incorporating that into our curriculum. Frequency Fun because it has the only exchange program, and Frequency Opportunity because it does translate into more opportunity when kids go on and work in the global economy. So I'm just gonna hand it out. I'm really sorry to interject, but it just sounded like that's really what it's all about.
One point that Patty made is actually very interesting and incisive, and insightful. And that is that, you know, part of the dilemma may be most people don't walk out of schools knowing the language, and part of it is because they have no one to speak it to. So it is a fascinating concept to say, if this school district picked a language for everybody, that would mean that language would be a second language that children could use everywhere with their friends. It's a fascinating concept. In Belgium, where I work, the second language is English. And the kids do, in starting at 7th grade, begin to speak with their friends.
I just wanted to add to that and say, if you picked a language and you did it well, by the time you got to high school, kids may be wanting to pick up a second language on top of it. So it doesn't mean that that's the only offering you have.
Barry, I have a quick question for you. Being you were the junior high principal and / middle school principal, and we had exploratory. When we stopped that, I'm sure it's all anecdotal or whatever, but did you see a big drop off on the other languages other than Spanish after we stopped that? That you can recall?
Well, Spanish was always,
Right.
by far the predominant.
Mainly French and German.
Yeah, they both started to show a decline. I don't know if I tie that into the exploratory program or that there was such an increase in interest in Spanish because you started hearing more about the cultural changes and the number of Spanish-speaking people coming into America. So I don't know which one or a combination of both that drove that. But they did happen about the same time.
Can I just ask you from a procedural standpoint, if for German 1 to exist in the program planning book that's going to be distributed, I believe it goes to the printer sometime in November?
Yeah, late November.
Okay, so we have 6 weeks or so so what is the next step on this?
So let me make a suggestion if I could, just to wrap this up. I hear the North Band rehearsing, so that's our cue that we're almost out of time. First and foremost, thanks to everyone for being here this evening. I think our entire German teaching department as well as our curriculum coordinator showed up, which is outstanding. And they did produce the document that Barry had referenced earlier that was provided to the full board. And a tremendous amount of work was put into that, as well as the multiple meetings that we had together. So first and foremost, thank you to all of you. Your professionalism is something I've truly grown to appreciate. What I've heard this evening from what I would couch as a consensus of this board is a willingness to allow this program to continue as we talk about the program of studies for the 2016-17 school year. I would make the suggestion that we honor that for the 2016-17 school year, while at the same time making sure that our German teachers, as well as any teachers in the school district, understand that, hey, as we look at this a year down the road, as we look at this a couple years down the road, if the numbers aren't there, then we're going to make the decision in all likelihood to eliminate the program. From a bigger picture, what I'm hearing is a need for a more robust conversation around world language education in the Council Rock School District. I mean, we really need a master plan, a comprehensive plan for world language studies. And that covers what are the languages, what's the scope of those studies. I'm hearing a lot around, what they call FLES, foreign language in the elementary schools. So I've heard that from multiple board members, and we have a lot of community members who, unfortunately, we haven't even heard from yet. Do a public comment over there, should you like to exercise that. So that's a piece of it. And then you have a piece that I wouldn't couch so much as marketing, as I simply would just education. How do we make sure that our students and their moms and dads, our parents and guardians, are educated on what is German, for instance? What's the value? What are the benefits? What are the utilities? Amy, you referenced STEM. I would agree with that. That's a huge piece of it. So there's just this educational component that I know the work that Lynn does right now and going down. That's there, but again, that's a limited approach. So what are the most effective ways that we can be able to accomplish that? So barring any subsequent discussion or voices to the contrary, I feel like a consensus is spoken here this evening. So I might move that we continue with it in the program of studies for the 2016-17 school year. Fire up these folks to educate, right? And do what you can to get the numbers. And as a school, 2 high schools, 3 middle schools, and the school district begin the larger process of determining how we can have a solid plan and a comprehensive plan and a very intentional and strategic look to this. So Denise, as committee chair, if what I just voiced seems to reflect this room this evening, perhaps we could end on that note.
I think that's fantastic. I want to thank everybody so much.
We will take public comment.